Welcome to day 28.
Yep.
We're winding this train down of Finding Joy, where if you're just joining us or just hopping on here, we're doing a 31-day study through the book of Philippians and about finding joy. Today's a little close to home, but it's a sweet reminder, and I think it will be for you too. But today we're going to talk about finding joy in weakness, which you might go, I mean, that seems so, we don't celebrate weakness very much, but in God's kingdom, like with a lot of other things, things sometimes can seem opposite or upside down, and this certainly is. But we're going to talk about and discover and see what Paul has to say about finding joy in our weakness and how our weakness is linked to God's power. Yeah. I'm going to read just a couple of quick verses for us. The first verse we kind of tagged on to the end of yesterday's passage, but we'll lead with it today. And very common verse, very well-known verse, probably have committed this to memory at some point. But it's Philippians 4, verses 13 and 14. For I can do everything through Christ who gives me strength. Even so, you have done well to share with me in my present difficulty. So remember, Paul is, speaking of his present difficulty, he's writing this letter from prison to a church in Philippi that he had started about 10 years prior. So, and so his present circumstances and difficulties that he's talking about are being in prison. Yeah. So we're going to kind of flesh that out and talk about another passage that he wrote in another book. And we're going to see how our weakness can be linked to our joy.
And which seems crazy. Those two words don't even act like they belong together. They don't seem like you should use them in the same sentence. Because we don't ever celebrate weakness as a culture.
Yep.
We don't give away weakness awards or, the worst performance of the month trophies. I mean, we celebrate strength and achievement and top in class. We don't celebrate weakness. I don't see many books written about weakness. I don't take tests that identify your weakness. So we're a strengths-based culture, and they were back then too, which is why this flipped the whole idea on its head. As a pastor, I've heard this comment a lot, and I want to ask you whether it's true or whether it's false. So here's a little true-false test. God will never give you more than you can handle. Is that true or is that false? Think about it. God will never give you more than you can handle. It's obviously false, but everybody says that as if it's true. There are so many references in Scripture where God gives us way more than we can handle. Here's the truth about a weakness. God will never give you more than He can handle. You see, Paul says this in verse 13, I can do everything, but only as it pertains through Christ. Christ is the one that gives me the strength to do everything, meaning I don't have the strength to do all of this alone. I don't have the strength to manage my attitudes and my emotions and to be kind and grateful and generous. I cannot do that on my own. And I know you might feel weak in this moment. Congratulations. We have the opportunity to turn to God in that moment of weakness. I think that's why it's so important in our prayers to verbalize our weakness to God. It's not like we're tipping Him off and telling Him something He didn't know. Like, I really struggle with this. He's going, I know. But we bring it to Him and say, I'm wrestling with this. This is hard for me. This is not in my nature. It's not, I don't know what to do. And in that moment, actually, we're inviting God's strength into the situation.
Yeah.
We're inviting His power to meet our weakness and see what He does. That's one truth about weakness.
And it's almost a surrender of our weakness to Him when we say, I cannot, so God, you have to. God will use your weaknesses to show you His strength, and He knows we know what our weaknesses are. He knows areas that we're weak in. The psalmist David says, you remember that we are dust. We are frail. God knows that. He made us. So when we are weak and we come to him with our weakness and say, whether our weakness is a physical weakness, an illness, spiritual weakness, an emotional weakness, no matter what, when we bring him our weakness, it's an opportunity for him to show his strength. And so sometimes it makes you wonder, does God sometimes give us weakness to show us his strength? Are those things, is that by design so that we are not relying on our own strength, that we have to rely on him because we in and of ourselves just do not have the strength on our own, and we have to rely on him. So he knows those things, and there's not a thing that is too big for God. Whatever our weakness is, nothing is too big for him, nothing's too great for him. At the same time, nothing's too small for him. We talked about that a little bit when we talked about prayer, that there's not a prayer that is too big or too small for God. And there's not a weakness that we have that is too great or too small for God to meet.
Yeah. So Rebecca alluded to this when we started, how close to home this sermon is, this lesson, devotion. And let me share a story with you real quick. I'm 48 years old now, and when I was 33 years old, we were pastoring at a church in Knoxville, Tennessee, and in charge of the youth department and so forth. And I specifically remember teaching and struggling with my voice. And I didn't know what it was. I tried going on special diets, coming off of caffeine, all these remedies that I was reading. But yet I would still have almost a shakiness or a raspiness to my voice. And I could not figure it out. I was losing my mind trying to figure out what this was and what to do about it. I went to multiple doctors. Nobody had a solution. All the blood work came back fine. There was no answers. And I wrestled in that season of darkness for almost a year, and eventually was referred to the Vanderbilt Voice Clinic there in Tennessee. And I'll never forget the day that I walked into the voice clinic, and I walked back to my appointment, and doctor after doctor, 3 of them in a row, came and tested me and had me say things and put a scope down my throat and so forth. And then they all 3 stood in front of me and told me words that I thought I couldn't handle. They said, "You have a disorder called spasmodic dysphonia." And I said, "Well, what's that?" And they said, "It's something neurologically that's changed in your brain, and it affects your vocal cords, and it makes them shaky, and you can't control that. It's uncontrollable." I said, "Well, fine. Let's fix it. Let's get after it. What can we do? What can I take? What do I need to do differently to fix that?" And they said there is no cure. Now, I'm a professional pastor, right? I mean, I speak for a living, and I remember in that moment going, "No, God, you cannot give me an issue with my voice. I mean, that's my moneymaker, right? This is my calling. This is what I've given my life to. And now you're going to take that opportunity away from me?" There were some dark days, and I tried several treatments that nothing worked, nothing helped. I remember begging God in prayer, "Please heal me." We fasted and we prayed. I went to the elders of our church and said, "Would you pray for God's healing? I know that he's strong enough. I know that he can, and I believe that he will." I mean, I had mustered up as much faith as I could, and no healing. No healing. And I had wrestled with God, why? For probably 6 to 7 years. And later, in my 40s, I remember being asked to teach about God being our healer, and thought, no, you've asked the wrong guy to teach that lesson, because I asked God for healing and he didn't give it to me. Why don't you have another pastor teach on healing, one that's had it in their life? I'll never forget studying writing that message, and this is what God told me in that moment. I may never heal you from this, but I will heal you through this. I will walk you through this. And every time you step up to the microphone to teach my word, every time you stand in front of a group and you're conscious about this disorder, you will lean into me or you won't make it. This is what we're talking about. Paul said he had this thorn in his flesh too. We don't know what it is. We don't know what his ailment was that he wished would go away. Mm-hmm. But we all have them. We all have these thorns that we wish God would take care of and strengthen us right now. And he says, hold on. I may never take that away from you, but I will walk you through it. Mm-hmm. Paul wrote to another church that he started in Corinth in 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 9. We'll close with this. He said, I asked God 3 times to take this from me. And 3 times he told me no. And here's what God told me. My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. God's power is looking for weakness to step into so he can be the star of that story, right? He says, my power is made perfect in your weakness. And here was Paul's response. Therefore, I will boast all the more gladly about my weakness, so that the power of Christ may rest on me. For the sake of Christ, I am content with weakness, insults, hardships, persecutions, and calamities. For when I am weak, then I am strong. What's your thorn? Where's the arena of your life today that you say, you know what? I need God. I feel so empty and shallow and weak in this arena. Then I beg you to do what so many of us have had to do. We bring that weakness to God and say, would you turn this into my strength? It's funny. It's kind of not funny, but it is ironic. Now I have guys that travel a lot, and they listen to all of our Man Up podcasts as they travel. And they'll call me and say, oh, Jay, it's so good to hear your voice. I just love it. It's so different. And I think, really? You highlight that as a strength. And I've spent 15 years thinking that is a weakness. This is what God does. So wherever you're wrestling with today, invite him in. It's okay to feel all those things too. Mm-hmm. You're going to feel them. You're not superhuman, but we ask for a supernatural power to step in where we're weak. I hope that this has been helpful. It's not easy to talk about, but we wanted to go there today. We wanted to invite you into probably the same thing Paul felt. Is God, please show up where I'm weak. We love you. We love your families. And we can't wait to see you again tomorrow.